In Athenian society, the arts held a paradoxical position. On one hand, they were revered as vital to civic and cultural life. On the other, they were scrutinized for their potential dangers. Theater, especially during festivals honoring Dionysus, engaged audiences with profound themes of justice, fate, and the human condition. These performances united diverse groups, reinforced cultural identity, and upheld democratic ideals. However, Plato considered theater deeply problematic. He argued that its emotional appeals undermined rationality and fostered moral corruption. By depicting flawed heroes like Achilles, poets and playwrights glorified excessive passions and distorted human ideals, thereby threatening society's ethical foundations. For Plato, theater was not mere entertainment, but a powerful force that eroded both individual virtue and social well-being. Yet Plato was not categorically opposed to art and poetry. The Republic itself is rich with myths, allegories, and metaphors, and it contains dramatic moments including the trial and death of Socrates that highlight his nuanced understanding of the art's role in philosophical discourse and politics. This video essay examines the paradox of Plato's stance on art and aesthetics, exploring how he could be a foremost critic of Athenian art, while simultaneously grounding his philosophy in myths and allegories. In the Republic, Plato adopts a critical view of the arts, condemning theatrical imitation, mimesis, for eroding rational thought, unsettling the harmony of the tripartite soul, and jeopardizing societal morality. Yet paradoxically, myths and stories remain central to his vision for the ideal city, Callipolis. Through allegories such as the cave, the tripartite soul, and the myth of Plato demonstrates that he ultimately regards art as a meticulously regulated tool for cultivating virtue, sustaining civic order, and guiding souls toward both a well-ordered life and their immortality. In this sense, Plato stands out as the early pioneers of an ethics-based approach to aesthetics, who sees emancipatory potentials of arts. Central to Plato's argument is his rejection of mimesis, or artistic imitation, as a distortion of reality. In the Republic, Socrates outlines a hierarchy of creation. The ideal form, the essence or perfect blueprint of a thing. The physical manifestation crafted by artisans, an imperfect version of the ideal. The artistic representation, an imitation even further removed from truth. Mimetic art is thrice removed from the truth. Republic, 595b 596e. Because artists engage only with appearances, Plato argues, their work can deceive and distract audiences from comprehending deeper realities. Rather than promoting wisdom, mimetic art through glorifying flawed heroes, appealing to base passions, or reinforcing irrational behavior, prevents us from recognizing genuine truth and can even derail moral and intellectual development. Republic 606d. Plato's famous allegory of the cave illustrates these dangers of living in a world shaped by illusions. It appears in Book 7 of the Republic, 514a517c, and remains one of the most influential metaphors in Western philosophy, encapsulating both Plato's theory of forms and his view of the philosopher's journey towards enlightenment. Picture human beings living in an underground cave with an entrance open to the light. Inside, prisoners are chained so they can only look straight ahead, unable to turn their heads. They see only shadows cast on the wall before them by objects passing behind them. Republic, 514a5. The prisoners of the allegory represent the majority of people trapped in ignorance, mistaking shadows and echoes for reality. The cave itself symbolizes the world of appearances. Everything we experience through our senses that can deceive us into accepting false beliefs. Yet, the escape is possible. Plato then describes one prisoner who is freed from his chains. At first, he suffers and resists. When one of them was untied and compelled to stand up, turn his head, and looked towards the light, he'd find all these things painful. Republic, 515d. Step by step, he grows accustomed to what lies beyond the shadows. He moves from looking at shadows to seeing reflections in water, then on to real objects themselves. Finally, he beholds the sun representing the form of the good illuminating and governing all else. He'd find it easier to look at the light of the stars and the moon by night than look at the sun and the light of the sun by day. Republic, 516a. Having grasped true knowledge, the newly enlightened prisoner is compelled to return to the cave to help others. But upon re-entering the darkness, his eyes are no longer adapted. The other prisoners mistake his disorientation for foolishness and may even become hostile. Wouldn't they say his sight was ruined and that his journey above wasn't worth it at all? Republic, 517a. In this dramatic twist, Plato argues that those who cling to illusions are often threatened by truths that challenge their established reality. The philosopher, however, has a moral duty to share enlightenment, no matter how unwelcome it may be. So, how does the allegory of the cave connect back to Plato's suspicion of the arts? For Plato, mimetic art is akin to the shadows on the cave, all mere appearances that trap us in ignorance. It captivates our senses, appealing to our emotions rather than guiding us to the higher realm of forms. The danger is clear. By indulging in such illusions, we risk never rising above them to seek true knowledge or moral clarity. Mimesis is not merely a superficial failing, but a barrier to enlightenment and societal harmony. Plato's theory of tripartite soul. Imagine your soul not as a single entity, but as a complex, dynamic system. This is the starting point for understanding Plato's profound critique of the arts, particularly poetry, music, and drama. In the Republic, Plato doesn't just lay out a blueprint for an ideal state. He also explores the inner workings of the human psyche, and it's this theory of the tripartite soul that forms the bedrock of his argument about art's potentially corrupting influence. Plato posits that the human soul is comprised of three distinct, often conflicting, elements: the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive or desiring. Think of it like a chariot team, where each horse and the charioteer have their own drives and tendencies. The rational soul. This is the charioteer. It's the seat of intellect, reason, and our capacity for understanding truth and wisdom. It's the part of us that craves knowledge, seeks order, and strives for the good. The spirited soul. This is the noble steed, the source of our ambition, courage, and love of honor. It's the part that drives us to achieve greatness, to defend what we value, and to stand up for what is right. The appetitive or desiring soul. This is the unruly steed. It's driven by our most basic physical desires: hunger, thirst, lust, and the pursuit of pleasure. It's impulsive, insatiable, and often resists the control of the other two elements. For Plato, a virtuous and balanced soul is one where the rational element guides, supported by the spirited, and keeps the appetitive in check. When the rational element reigns supreme, with spirited and appetitive elements acting in accordance with reason, the result is harmony within the individual, reflecting the ideal state. A harmonious soul is a virtuous soul. The corrupting influence of imitative art. Plato believes that the arts, especially imitative forms of theater, poetry, and music, pose a direct threat to this delicate balance. These forms are not aimed at cultivating our rational side, but instead at manipulating and intensifying our emotions through appealing directly to the spirited and appetitive. Think of a tragedy. What emotions does it elicit? Pity, fear, sorrow, grief. These are all related to the spirited and appetitive elements of the soul. They bypass our reason and can even actively weaken it. Plato argues that indulging in these emotions, though cathartic, cultivates irrationality. It's like letting that unruly appetitive horse run wild. Comedies, with their reliance on mockery and laughter, can also be problematic. Plato suggests they can normalize behaviors we ought to find shameful, further undermining our ability to regulate our desires. Plato uses powerful metaphors to emphasize how art can distort our perception. He compares the effects of imitative art to optical illusions. Just as our eyes can be tricked by appearances, our souls can be misled by emotional manipulations. He also speaks of imitative art as a kind of disease that weakens the rational element, further eroding our self-discipline. Plato feared that these imitative art forms can create a feedback loop, weakening our ability to reason and strengthening the most chaotic parts of our soul. This is why he called for censorship, fearing the power of imitative art to shape our very character, both as individuals and as communities. Beyond imitation, art in service of the soul. If Plato is so critical of imitative art, does he banish art entirely from his ideal state? The answer is no, but it comes with a crucial caveat. Plato didn't hate art itself. Rather, he sought to redefine its purpose. Instead of being a mirror to the world, reflecting appearances and stirring up unruly emotions, art could become a tool for the soul's ascent towards truth and the good. This is where Plato's alternative vision for aesthetics emerges. He believed that art, at its best, could move beyond mere imitation to become an instrument of moral and intellectual growth. It could inspire virtue, cultivate reason, and point towards the higher realities, to what truly is. His prescription wasn't to abolish art entirely, but to refine it, to put it in service of the soul's transformation. The myth of awe, Plato's vision of true art. This alternative vision is beautifully encapsulated in the closing section of the Republic, the myth of A. This myth, a fantastical tale of a soldier who comes back to life and recounts his experience of the afterlife, isn't just a religious allegory. It's also fundamentally a work of art that embodies Plato's reformed aesthetics. Unlike the tragic poets who focus on the chaotic and emotionally charged aspects of human experience, the myth of A uses a powerful narrative to point toward a higher plane. It's a vision that goes beyond mere earthly appearances to present the ultimate rewards of justice and the profound consequences of injustice. It's a tale that takes us beyond this life into the realm of souls and ultimate choice, and provides a framework for understanding the true value of a virtuous life. It is the story of a man who died, yet lived again to tell us a story that serves as the conclusion to the whole of Plato's Republic. The son of Arminius was a valiant soldier from Pamphylia. He was killed in battle, and his body, as was the custom, was laid out for burial. Yet 10 days later, when the bodies were recovered, R's body had not decayed. It was as fresh as if he had simply gone to sleep. 2 days later, as he lay on his funeral pyre, R came back to life and recounted his incredible journey into the afterlife. He told of a place where souls gathered after death. In this place, he saw openings in the earth and 2 others reaching up to the heavens. Between these openings, judges were seated, and based upon their past life, souls were sent either upwards to heaven or downwards into the earth, bearing signs of their just or unjust nature. R was not sent up or down. He was directed to observe all that occurred and to serve as a messenger for the living. He witnessed souls ascending from the underworld, weary and covered in dust, and others descending from the heavens, clear and refreshed. They would gather in the meadow, sharing their experiences, some weeping over the horrors of the underworld, and others joyously describing the marvels they had seen in heaven. Then, the souls were led to a place where they faced an extraordinary choice. A speaker, standing near the throne of the goddess Lachesis, explained the process. Each soul would choose a new life. These lives were all arrayed before them, lives of men and women, tyrants, beggars, athletes, musicians, artists, and even animals of all kinds. The speaker declared, "Your guardian spirit will not be given to you by lot. You will choose a guardian spirit for yourselves." The choices would not be assigned to them, but they would make the choice themselves. Once a soul had made its choice, it was taken to Clotho, who spun the thread of the soul's fate. Then, the thread was given to Atropos, who made the thread of that life unchangeable. Next, they passed under the throne of necessity, and as they passed, they each had to drink a portion of the water from the river Lethe. Those who drank only a little retained some wisdom and reason. Those who drank deeply forgot the choices they had made, and even who they were. As for Ah himself, he was not permitted to drink of the water of forgetfulness. He suddenly awakened, lying on his funeral pyre, knowing that his own time had not yet come. Instead of manipulating emotions, the myth of A offers a vision that stirs the soul towards reason and self-reflection. It highlights the importance of choosing a virtuous path, understanding that our actions have eternal consequences, and that our true happiness depends on the condition of our souls. Unlike other art forms, which Plato claims can corrupt us with base emotion and a false sense of pleasure, the myth of A serves as a moral compass, guiding us through this life and illuminating the next. It shows us the path that we, as rational beings, should strive to take. The myth of A is an example of what happens when the rational soul takes over the role of artist. In it, Plato demonstrates how art can and must be aligned with reason, truth, and virtue. This kind of art is not a distraction, but a catalyst. It can help us to escape the cave of our material existence and ascend towards the contemplation of the good. Conclusion. Plato's critique of theater reflects his broader philosophical concerns about truth, virtue, and social order. By warning against the dangers of mimesis and its capacity to destabilize both individual character and civic harmony, he underscores the need for artistic expression to serve higher ethical and philosophical aims. Yet his proposals for tightly regulated art design to safeguard morals and uphold societal ideals raise difficult questions about freedom, creativity, and political power. A striking modern parallel emerges from the Islamic Revolution in Iran, where the post-revolutionary government censored artistic expression under the guise of protecting public virtue and collective values. As in Plato's model, this approach sought to curb potentially corrupting influences. However, it also sharply limited creative freedoms and diverse perspectives. This tension underscores a continuing dilemma. How can society harness art's capacity to uplift and educate without stifling its transformative, liberating potential? At the same time, Plato's emphasis on art's role in moral education remains powerfully relevant in our media-saturated age. He reminds us that creators bear responsibilities for how their work shapes hearts and minds, and that audiences, in turn, must engage critically with cultural products. The myth of A exemplifies how, when governed by reason and virtue, art can transcend mere imitation to guide souls toward higher truths. In an era still grappling with censorship, mass entertainment, and political propaganda, Plato's nuanced vision of aesthetics as both a catalyst for enlightenment and a force capable of manipulation continues to challenge us. Balancing the profound influence of art with the need to preserve freedom, pluralism, and moral reflection remains as urgent today as it was in ancient Athens.